I'd like to call the meeting of the Norfolk Advisory Committee to order. I'll take attendance. Jonathan Hurwitz.
Present.
Brian Beachkowski.
Here.
Joyce Terrio.
Here.
Rob Garrity.
Here.
David Lutz here. We have a quorum. We're expecting Kiara Moore to join us, and I'll recognize her at that time. We have, do we have minutes, Brian?
We do not.
No.
Okay. We also have one set of overdue minutes that you and I need to talk about, maybe teaming up to get done, the ones from the December
Yes.
hearing where you weren't back yet. And,
Right.
Yeah. Because we have a town clerk who's anxious
Yes.
to get those, so.
Concur.
We're going to review a couple of the town meeting articles for the spring town meeting. I'd like to start by recognizing the Community Preservation Committee. Are you still the chair, Cindy?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. And your guests that you've brought along. Congratulations on your continued chair.
You want me to grab a microphone?
If you could come to the table and so you could be recorded. The CPC has 5 articles. I think they're sort of the bulk of them are the traditional ones, but there are 2 that they're seeking our special attention to. And I'll turn it over to you, Cindy.
Sure, so you don't need me to discuss the standard ones?
We have the standard ones
Okay.
down. Thank you.
All right.
We've already got the write-up written, I'm pretty sure, so.
Okay, good to know. We have 3 project articles this year.
Oh, 3, I'm sorry. Okay, yep.
Yep. And my folks that I brought along are going to help me explain them.
Okay.
And so the first one is the Grange, and our proposed article language is to see if the town will vote to allocate from Community Preservation Fund Historical Preservation Reserve $40,000 for the exterior renovation of the Norfolk Grange Hall. So I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the historic nature of the Grange. Sam Ziegler is a member of the Grange and a member of CPC, and also Marie and Bruce Simpson are members of the Grange. And I told Sam it's just easiest for me to turn the explanation of what needs to be done and why over to him. So I think you probably need to grab a microphone, or you could come sit with me.
Hold on a second. Cindy, the thing that you had copied,
It's 2 sides.
sorry, I don't see, I was hoping to get the actual language of the warrant article.
It is there.
Why am I missing it?
Here. Maybe, the thing I just copied has it.
I somehow didn't get, thank you.
Maybe
I'll
you got
share.
a bad copy.
Yep,
Okay.
I have more of these, so I'm sure.
It's fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Sam. You're
Okay,
recognized.
well, I'm the president of the Grange right now and CPC member for the Historical Commission. And, I don't know, have you all seen this presentation?
Yes, I just
Yes.
followed it.
It pretty well explains what we want to do there. It's sort of maintenance things that have been put off for years, and there's the foundation, there's a brick foundation that has never been repointed. That's been waiting for a long time. The weather vane, which we had to remove when we did a roof job, has been, needs to be rebuilt and remounted. That's a good little project. Then there's across the front, there's a large shelf, sort of, runs across there that needs new flashing. Those are some of the bigger things. Then there's some windows that were never replaced in the rear of the building when previous work was done.
And so I will just qualify the language. It's not a maintenance, it's a restoration. in
Okay.
reading the
Yeah,
resolution.
it's all restoration type work.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, or?
No, I mean, estimates were developed, and as per community preservation standard operating procedure, obviously, we build in like a 10%, contingency, but then generally, we put a little more in, especially in this day and age with the problems with building materials still going on, so that we don't have to come back for a second go-around of asking money. And as you all know, any monies that are not spent, once the project are done, go right back, in this case, it will go back into the Historical Preservation Reserve.
And my business is in restoring antique buildings. So I think this is a good budget to cover everything that we're talking about.
And that would explain the difference between the cost estimate that was in the application versus
Yes.
what's in your warrant. It's 26 something in the application.
Yeah, and in the original application, did it include the stairs?
Well, we added in
We added in
a little
something
work,
else.
the stair, there's a rickety stair to the basement that needs to be
I think the
replaced.
fire chief, right?
Right, yeah, they went on an inspection and the fire chief mentioned that.
So we have there's an additional line item that wasn't in the very original presentation as well.
I have questions, but does anyone else have any questions at this time?
I do have
Some questions
Yep.
as well.
Jonathan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So forgive me, I've been in town a long time and I don't know. These are probably simple questions, but who owns the Grange? The town doesn't own it, correct?
No, it's, the Grange is a big organization. There's the state Grange, there's the national Grange. So it's the Grange, I guess, owns it. It's not just our little group here in town.
Okay. And do we collect property taxes or are they exempt for some reason? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
No,
Are you exempt? They're a
Yes.
nonprofit, I believe.
C3? Okay.
yeah, Marie is the treasurer. She would know.
Okay. And the last question I have is, since it's privately owned, obviously I know a lot of the space and usage is donated to the town. Is there, I guess, this is maybe a little open-ended, but are there limits imposed on the usage that for the town on behalf of the town? Is it subjugated to a certain amount of the space, a certain amount of time? Is it just upon request or on need? Like, what's the decision-making factor of if the town asks for space? How is that determined of whether
Well,
that
there's
usage is granted?
a lot of different groups rent the space.
I believe,
And there's, whenever the town has needed it, we've made it available.
the senior center is using it now, correct?
Yeah, senior center's using it now. The school was using it during pandemic.
But when you say other groups rent the space, does the town need to rent it, or is it at no
Yeah, well,
charge to the
yeah,
town?
they've paid
For a nominal fee.
a fee.
To
It's,
cover our gas usage, the electrical usage.
Yeah. Do you have any rough idea of, in totality, what those fees may have been over the past year or whatever period? Like, how much does the town spend renting the space? Just an order of magnitude, if you know.
The light is shining right on it. You gotta fix the angle on that. Push it off that way.
Thought I had that number readily available. Okay. So I'm.
Go ahead, Sid.
Excuse me. I'm Ann Proto.
Yep. Oh, we have mics.
Ann Proto, Recreation Director. I was just speaking to Marie. The enrichment program that was in place during COVID, the Grange rented space to us every day. We had morning classes, we had afternoon classes, and it was $2,000 a month, which seems like a fair amount of money, but it was far less than any other place that we went to rent. And it was perfect. So I can just speak to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Justin, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, currently, good evening, everyone, and hopefully you guys can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the senior center is currently utilizing the Grange while the senior center does some renovations, and the rent is similar to what Ann just said, for about $2,000 to utilize that space for the time being, for senior activities as well.
Thank you.
You all.
Joyce, did you have a question?
I did. Point of clarification first. Based on the historical nature of the Grange, and I know that other CPC funds have been utilized in the past for the Grange, I just want to be sure that the verbiage of historical and restoration are exactly what is allowable for historical usage of funds out of the CPC.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And may I ask one other
Sure.
question? How was this received by your committee?
Unanimously approved.
Thank you very much.
Rob?
So, do you have to bid the construction work? It is public funds.
Well, I got estimates from qualified restoration contractors for the work.
That's a question we probably want to ask. Have you ever talked about that, Cindy? Has any of your projects that have been on
I don't.
public, I mean, they're not
Private?
publicly held, but they're,
I can probably chime in on that one.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Well, CPC funds, they do not have to undergo Chapter 30B, like if the town was doing it.
right.
They're utilizing those funds.
But they could do competitive bids to ensure that the money's
Absolutely.
used wisely.
Correct.
But if it was, say, we were funding something that affordable housing was building, that would be, they would
That
have
be
to
bid, yeah.
go through the competitive bidding process.
Can I ask, I have a question, if announced.
Yeah, thank you.
Does the Grange have a capital investment fund or part of the, as part of your annual dues and rents and things like put aside for maintenance and potential improvements?
We have a kitchen fund. We've been saving on a weekly, monthly.
Thank you.
We have a kitchen fund. As you know, that's one of our projects, is to put a catering room in the rear of the Grange, which was at one point the original Norfolk Library for many, many, many years before our own library was built. We are spearheading that project, and currently we have over $20,000 in that account, which we think that money will be expended
Sure.
for that purpose. But our dues to the state is $37.50. So that doesn't get you very far.
But when you rent it, are you building in maintenance costs and things like that into
If-
rent?
if
I'm not
not-
saying we need to up the rent,
We
especially on
don't.
the town, but
We don't plan for that, but we do charge $30 an hour
Okay.
to use the Grange, which, if you've ever tried to rent
yeah.
space, you know that is pretty inexpensive. We are a nonprofit. We want the Grange to be available to other groups in town, other nonprofits, and the town itself, so we keep the cost really low. And when we can, we tried to take money from our rentals and put some of it into our kitchen fund, and that's why we have $20,000 in there right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Just want to point out, Kiara joined us a while back.
Thank you. Kiara, could you acknowledge your presence by saying here?
Here.
Thank we go. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
No.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Next would be, you're in charge of this portion of the agenda here, Cindy.
So much power. The next would be the updating of the open space and recreation plan. So Rich fortunately is here, even though I didn't invite him. But both he and Ann can speak to this.
Rich is everywhere.
Rich is everywhere. So our proposed language is to see if the town will vote to allocate from the Community Preservation Fund Open Space Reserve $60,000 for an update of the Norfolk Open Space and Recreation Plan. My little explanation here is that the Open Space and Recreation Plan is a 7-year strategic planning document that provides Norfolk with a policy guide outlining a clear direction for the balanced use of the town's natural resources and passive/active recreational areas. The current OSRP expires in July of '24. Obviously, it takes time to do a new one. State-approved plan will allow the town to be eligible for certain state and federal grants and will work in partnership with the town's updated or soon-to-be updated master plan.
Thank you. I have questions, but Rob's like itching tonight, so go ahead, Rob.
Actually,
Oh, you didn't?
so it says we use the master plan to become eligible for state grants.
The OSRP.
Yeah, the OSRP. To have we gotten state grants that have done some recreational or open space stuff?
That would be probably a question for Ann when she comes back in.
So one thing I'm interested in is several years ago we went heavy on trails, like walking trails, but it seems to have abated, and like they're not kept up, particularly the ones made by private subdivisions as a part of their permits. So I think you need a new master plan to address that.
I actually, coincidentally, had my interview already with the master plan people, and that was something that I mentioned to them.
Great.
Put in. Rob was asking if we've ever received state grants from our last,
Or open space?
or open space. From the open space plan, because it allows us to be eligible for state grants.
So, other than the Lynn property, or the Lynn property was purchased for part of it, with state grants. More recently, recreation has not.
Okay.
We are planning with the expansion of pond.
Matt, I'm sorry. I've got to get used to this.
Ann Proto, Recreation Director. The Lynn property, I believe, was purchased partly with state grants. We have not recently used state grants recreation. I'm not sure about conservation. But we are actually planning on using the trail grant with the expansion of Pond Street. We have not yet formally acquired that land. It's a process, a very long process. But once we do that, we are planning to use, or planning to apply, and it's a matching grant, but it's a significant grant.
Great. I think the old kids' place used this, the one that existed on Boardman had used a state grant to get built many, many, many years
Been
ago.
like the 70s or 80s.
Yeah,
I
it was an urban self-help group.
actually was here then.
I only know because I worked for the agency that made the grant, so
Yeah.
I worked for the agency that made the grant.
I
But
think It was installed by volunteers, but I think it was Gorick product, and I think it was part, it
Yeah,
was,
okay. So,
there is one other, we did do a shared street grant. I don't know if that was,
shared streets is a
I think that's
DPW
separate.
DOT thing, yeah.
I thought that was separate.
It would be worth having the Conservation Commission and the CPC identify properties that would be eligible for purchase that we could apply for state grants. I mean, I think because we have the CPC, we sort of assume we're in pretty good shape, but there's lots of money on the table every year from the state
Right.
that could be used. So prioritizing open space purchases and maybe going after some state money could supplement what you guys end up doing. Yes, Jonathan?
I realize no one may have this on the tip of their tongue, but I'll ask anyway. How long is the plan good for? It was seven years?
7 years.
Does anyone know what we spent on creating that plan 7 years ago?
Less.
Less? Where I'm
Just a
ultimately
guess.
going with the question is, I'd love to see what we spent on the plan 7 years ago and the money we received in grants as a result of having that plan. Because if we spent $60,000 7 years ago, I'm sure it was less, but just for sake of argument, we spent $60,000 and told the town it would be a good idea to spend $60,000 because look at all the grants that it'll open us up to. And then we got $10,000 in grants as a result of it. I'm not so sure of the payback, right, on that plan investment. So I would be curious before we spend another $60,000 to at least understand. Obviously, there's the potential of grants, but if we're actually not doing everything necessary to actually realize it and then get some payback on the plan expense.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Actually, though, I think the value of this document is it helps guide our own money. And CPC has spent a lot of our own money on doing things, and we've done some significant things, although it seems like it's been a while since there's been a major thing. But, you know, Gump's Farm or whatever we're calling that thing feels like the last big thing we did. And that's why you have one of these. So you know, what do we want? What are the gaps? We're not that good at grants at all in any part of town government. So I don't know that we should hold up, we should say that this has to be like a document with an ROI.
It's a totally fair point, but then I would ask the question of if we're doing this for our own benefit and we don't need to make it compliant for the state grants, can we do this for $30,000 for our, not necessarily compatible with what the state is expecting, but still get a plan in place that will meet our internal needs to have that governing document, the vision, but is that more cost-effective to put a plan like that together that's not going to necessarily have to be I's dotted and T's crossed for all the things the state's requiring to then enable us to receive grants that we're not going to get? I don't know.
That's Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rob.
The thing that would concern me is the easiest thing for a consultant to do to knock off hours is probably to knock off public interaction. They'll just sit back and pull something they have on a shelf off and change the street names. And what we really want is the public interaction on these planning documents. You want them to spend the time talking to people. So that's why they cost money. And it's not like this is money, frankly, that's fighting against, school. This isn't money that we could spend on something else. This money is going nowhere else other than open space purposes. So I'd love to, there's a tremendous piece of property over on Fruit Street that we don't have a plan for, do we? We had a plan, didn't work.
We had a plan, didn't work.
Is there a new plan that we could think of, Because, yeah. So I think planning is so important.
I'm going to follow up a little bit. I do think that the other thing that is coloring this is that this probably wasn't eligible, it was probably not an eligible expense 7 years ago. When did that law change where they opened up the CPC funds for things like maintenance and planning?
I think CPC used it last time.
Oh,
That was
last
opened
time?
up
Okay.
quite a long
But it was
time ago.
it was early on in that, so I don't,
And
this wasn't an eligible cost when they originally created the Community Preservation Act, Jonathan, but it became one because of, not the SCORP particularly, but planning SCORP, I keep calling it the state name, the open space plan specifically, but general planning and other related non-acquisition things were added. I think it's, to Rob's point, I think it's probably a good idea to spend money that's going to be spent on open space to make sure we're doing it right, and also making ourselves eligible for state funds.
Especially with
Rich,
the
I'm sorry.
giant project coming forward.
So a couple of things in the conversations with the Conservation Commission. I've been
Yep.
with them a couple of times on the topic. Was actually working as part of more on the conservation preservation side, that planning work that hasn't necessarily occurred to the level, probably in some cases it can, and more thoroughly, so that way when properties become eligible or potentially acquisitions, you can have conversations with property owners earlier on about intentions with the property to, one, be prepared to go for these grants too, because there is usually a time crunch associated with them, and particularly just having a town meeting and so forth. So that's one of the things that the Conservation Commission, sorry, tongue twist for me, wants to focus on this round, as well as the maintenance aspect that you touched on earlier, is, have a plan and put the plan together. And then one of the things of this process is to have a permanent open space committee that can feed in when these projects come up to evaluate them, whether they make sense or not. Is it, habitat protection? Is there other recreational opportunity? That kind of planning work. So that's one of their goals going forward with this plan, to do more of, and actually start to have more of outreach with property owners now to see, what they might think of the property long-term, short-term, and how we can be a little more strategic about it instead of react, because I know, there are opportunities for property owners. We might want to try to acquire them, and some of them might be in a position where they may be able to, reduce the acquisition by the offset with capital gains, right? But if we don't have those conversations earlier on, it's kind of hard to tell. So I know that's something they really want to focus on more. So that's a forward thinking. But this plan too, and I'm going to work with Ann on this, was to do a little more of the recreational planning work that a little bit more robust than it was in prior years. So that's probably honestly where the budget might have crept up a little more than you maybe anticipated, was to try to have an equal balance, that the effort going on the conservation side, open space preservation, is equal to the recreation side. One isn't suffering from the others, because sometimes that can happen with these planning documents. So they're really trying to create the equity this time around.
Regarding recreation, so we're acquiring an additional 43 acres at Pond Street. And we very much, the discussion has been to develop trails and along with conservation through that land.
And a canoe landing, right?
Pardon me?
And a canoe landing, right?
Hopefully, absolutely. And we recognize that there's a lot of projects going on in town, and so we're really looking at other ways to fund things, and the grants that Massachusetts offers is definitely on the list. It is really probably the resource that we will be using for for the trails.
Yes, Brian.
One quick clarification. This is to use the CPC funding for this own purpose, right? This is not town separate funding.
Correct.
And then the second is with the 2017 plan. Which decisions over the last 5 years were guided by that? Like specifically the things that were in the needs analysis. Can you connect those into how they guided specific decisions within the council?
I would probably want to take a look at it to get you a better answer. I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I don't want to wing it. I would.
Yeah.
I want to give you an accurate answer.
Please.
So I'd take.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And that's not really something that I can answer either. We're just kind of the mechanism. We're not the implementer of the plan.
So in the last plan, recreation lands were accounted for, but there wasn't a lot of planning or recommendations made for those lands. I can say that we took part of that and did additional planning for the fields and absolutely worked off that list to make repairs.
Great. Thank you.
Excuse me.
If you could maybe talk to Conservation Commission or whatever it might be, to be able to give us a sense of any of their decisions were guided by that plan.
Sure.
I do think that these plans have in the past been put in a drawer and forgotten about until the next time they need to update them, so. And I'm hoping that what you're telling us tonight is that that's not the intention this time, so.
Well, and that as well for on this side of it, that it doesn't just sit on the shelf, and that's why the driver this go around is to create that permanent open space committee. So there is
Sure.
a group overseeing to make sure, hey, what are we doing, and we're the accountability of doing the plan.
And as a one-time member of the Conservation Commission, I'll blame myself for not being one of the more active members on that. Cindy's taking the fall too, so, I mean, when it's just the Conservation Commission and you're acknowledging that by thinking about this committee, it's the bottom of the list of things you're going to do on every meeting is talk about open space, but thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Nope.
Thanks. Cindy, you've got another one?
Last one. And this one is, okay, I'll just preface this by saying this idea has been kicking around for a while. And that is about the kind of sad state of Town Hill. So our proposed article language is to see if the town will vote to allocate from the Community Preservation Fund Open Space Reserve $15,000 for a feasibility study for the rehabilitation of Norfolk Town Hill, including but not limited to the infrastructure and the gazebo. Our explanation, obviously Norfolk Town Hill is often used park for community events. There are deficiencies regarding ADA compliance, electrical and irrigation infrastructure, and the gazebo itself. So the feasibility structure would be designed to develop a plan for correcting these issues, as well as strategize how to rehabilitate Town Hill to facilitate the inclusion of the public and best meet the needs of the town. We've had one of our conservation members has been very active in Al Finney, and Todd Lindmark, our finance director, was the first person who actually asked me about it, and Ann, and I'm sure Rich is involved too. I can't really speak to the infrastructure and such, but Ann would be better able to answer kind of what is in mind for this.
Actually, you can answer the question that I was about to ask, is who's actually responsible for Town Hill?
That's a very good question. Historically,
You can give me your answer and then I'll ask.
So historically, DPW has taken care of it because there's an irrigation system and electrical, but over the past few years, even I worked to get additional benches along with the previous senior director, and because Recreation is responsible for the tree lighting and all the tree lighting, we're very interested in the electrical. The electrical needs to be totally redone. It needs to be taken out. So when I started, we're talking over 20 years ago, one of the first expenses I was told, and I had to do, was spend about $3,500 just to get the Christmas lights on. And since then, there's something all the time. And if you may or may not have noticed, on any given night, half the Christmas lights are on and half are not. There are outlets that are sticking up out of the ground. They are not the correct outlets for outside. No one knows what they're connected to. It's a little bit of a guess as far as, although I will say the person we work with, DPW, has a pretty good knowledge of what things are, and he makes things work. But he'll say, you got me on that one. And there are outlets that literally just don't work. Plus, they're sticking up out of the ground. It just needs to be brought up to speed altogether. Recently, we did work on the irrigation system, but that still does need mapping. That was put in, I think, I'm not going to remember the year, but it was put in. It was put in by Joe Nolan. So no map. He was a firefighter since.
Okay.
Must have been when they lowered the hill.
Yeah. Yep. So, but we don't have a map. So when we need to go fix something, it's not easy to do. Again, we've figured. It's been. I don't want to say we, because I mean, the grounds foreman has figured out where things are. The pump just recently went. That was replaced. But so it's the electrical, it's the infrastructure altogether, including the irrigation, but very much it's the accessibility. There's it was built before 88, 2004, certainly even before 2010, but it's really more about having the town hill being completely inclusive. So people can easily get to Town Hill to do whatever they do. The concerts, we have several concerts coming up. There's a lot that takes place on Town Hill.
Yep. Yes, Jonathan.
Is there a well for the irrigation, or is that on town water?
Nope, it's a well.
Does that well only serve Town Hill? Like, what else does that well service?
Town Hill.
Just Town Hill?
It's an irrigation well. That's for.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Brian?
Based on your description, should we be worried about children on Town Hill at the electrical stuff that is not working in the wrong outlets and they're just sticking out?
No one's going to be electrocuted, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I will say it's not ideal to have, 12 or 8 to 10 inch stubs sticking out of the ground. It's not.
Right.
They shouldn't be there, and there aren't proper covers on them. Far from an electrical expert, but if you walked over there, you would be like, oh, I don't think I'd want that anywhere near my yard. It just needs to be completely redone. Even lighting the trees, we had to light some trees for the lions off the library this past winter because there's a plug there and doesn't work. Don't know where it's connected.
Great. Joyce, sorry.
Please, that's okay. I think my question is going to be for Cindy, maybe a couple of them. So, once again, clarification. Where does the feasibility study fall in as far as verbiage and allowance with CPC and the Act?
It's a rehabilitation of a park.
Okay.
And I did check we often consult with the Community Preservation Coalition, and I did check with them to make sure that it was kosher under our allowed uses before we went down this path.
Okay, so that's for the feasibility study. So the study comes back and it says,
Do this.
you know where this question's going.
I would anticipate it would fit within the allowed uses of the Community Preservation Act if just doing the study to rehabilitate and restore, then yes, we would be rehabilitating and restoring. If anything came under more of a maintenance, we couldn't. So that decision, that, breakout, it would have to be determined whenever the recommendations come back.
Okay, so the recommendations come back from the feasibility study, which we've used CPC funds for to the tune of 15K. The study comes back, and then the parties to be all come together and take the study and say, okay, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do this. Couple of different scenarios. They would be coming back to CPC with a plan for additional funds to continue to follow through on the feasibility study for the continued rehabilitation of the park.
I would anticipate that would be logical to assume that, yes.
Okay. So, thank you.
Go ahead, Ann, if you've got a.
I was just going to say, Matt Hafner has been working with an architect who has engaged a structural engineer, an electrical engineer, and will also need a civil engineer because there will be stormwater to be addressed as well. And as far as the rehabilitation versus maintenance, I think the one structure is the gazebo, and I can speak to that. As beautiful as it is, be careful on a windy day because the cedar shingles fly off the roof.
And if I
it's also, it's rotting. It's rotting. And we've been slowly taking pieces off and trying to fix it, but it's
And just to add, Joe Nolan, who did the work, who was a firefighter, also had his own landscaping company and did quite well here in town.
He did.
And
He was
missed.
Yes.
So
he was. He did a wonderful thing. I mean,
Yep.
he was helping out.
Yep.
It's just that it's a combination of everything. That,
I was going to ask a specific question about the gazebo, but you just answered it, so thank you. But a general question, because I can't remember. If you spend money out of the open space fund on land, does it trigger an Article 97 protection scenario where, or is Town Hill already
It's
covered?
already got to be 97,
Does it?
It's parkland.
But we have parkland in town, it's not an Article 97 land.
And it already had public money mixed into it when we redid it back in like 92
Was it-
or 90
was
or
it-
whatever.
Was it environmental money or was it other money? It's the environmental money that triggers.
I don't know the
I
answer
want
to
to follow up on that. It's just, it's more a curiosity thing because it's a hit and miss issue on some of our parks and towns on whether they're covered by, protected by Article 97, which is the conservation land protection provision of the Constitution, so
Who would know the answer to that?
probably town council.
Okay.
How would,
And
It has
well,
to
we'll
come
look at
up.
the deed, well, yeah.
It doesn't.
it wouldn't be on the deed necessarily. It might have been triggered by a later investment from the state or something like that. But I'll do the research because I'm
Thank you.
curious. Go ahead, Brian.
One other question is on the master plan for the town and the B1. Is there any reason to coordinate this feasibility study with that overall master plan development so that it can be informed by our new master plan?
He's got one.
I would say yes.
And when is the master plan going to be ready?
Sooner than the end of next year because we're spending money on it for next year.
Yeah.
So.
So the first public workshop is April 25th, 7 PM, through Kennedy School. Hope to see you all there. We'll talk about it in a minute, but, so yeah, I would say those are the type of things that should be part of it. And I think they also as part of the plan, I know they've spoken to you, they've spoken to different departments, but they will be getting,
They haven't spoken to us yet. As a result of the transition of chairs, we've had to reschedule the meeting, and then
yes,
I
they
had to
haven't
cancel.
spoken to you yet, so.
I had to cancel,
But
but-
in general, that should be part of those are the topics that should come up
Yep.
as part of the planning process.
Great. Rob?
Is 15 grand enough? I mean, if you're talking about stormwater engineering and electrical engineering and structural engineering,
I can't address that. We are waiting for the architect to connect with the civil engineer. So I and others also have doubts.
this would be a 30B procurement, though. You can't, it's 15K. Don't you have to do like at least 3 letters and?
So it's, I don't want to, I think that because it's groundwork and engineering work, Justin may be able to address it, but I think that it does need to be.
Yeah. It's engineering work, so you could do a state contract, but a best practice, even if it's 15,000, you would try to get three quotes or so. But we would follow 30B on that if we wanted to there. But engineering services, you can sort of be exempt.
If you use, people in the state contract, or
All right.
house doctorate.
Does anyone else have any questions on this? Okay, thanks. Is that it for
I
you,
have a
Cindy?
question for you.
Yes.
you always ask me a question you haven't asked me. How much are in our balance?
How much you got?
Would you like to ask?
What's in your balance, Cindy?
Thank you. Someone
And
always
if you could
asks
actually,
me.
in all seriousness, if you've got if you could email, if it's written, send them. Yeah, email that to
All right.
Erica as well.
Would you like
That'd be
me to
great.
say
But
it out
go
loud?
ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. As of February, in our undesignated fund, we had just over 3 million. In our open space fund, we had 92,000. In our affordable housing fund, we have 92,000. And in historical preservation, we have almost 727,000, which is our hardest bucket to spend in this town.
Yes.
So can I ask a question? Is educational material account for historic preservation like the panels we put over by?
Those were paid for out of historical preservation, yes.
Okay, so you can
Have
do
an
more
idea
of
for
that.
some new ones?
No,
Okay.
not really. I haven't lived in town long enough.
You would hesitate to offer anything, right? We got to find some more historical houses. But anyways, it's got to be one hiding somewhere.
Gotta be one hiding somewhere.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll send this over.
That'd be great. Thank you. Rich, did you indicate you were here for something else too, or?
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Because on my agenda, it says CPC voting on spring warrant articles related to CPC Concom.
So was the road?
I saw that in an email, but it's not on the agenda. I guess
And the
unanticipated business before the advisory committee? What was the other one?
That the master plan itself, the final round of.
Yeah,
Oh, was it on the agenda?
it's not on the one that's posted.
I think I just put planning board articles.
It's not,
It
The master plan we would be
was
planning
submitted by the
board.
planning board, according to the, yeah, Article 15, sponsored by the planning board, update 2007 town master plan.
okay, that's in what's on the website is not the formal posted agenda then, right? Because this doesn't have that.
On my town government, it has,
Sorry, Rich. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. Go ahead. Sorry.
There?
You're fine, yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm not reading far enough down.
Oh, all right.
Scroll button on that thing don't work anymore?
It does work, but I stopped at all the phone numbers. So Rich is here to talk to us about specifically the street acceptance, but then more generally, the article on the second year of funding for the master plan.
So the street acceptance, Wright Farm Road should be pretty straightforward and simple. The Preserve Bikini Pond up behind us here off of Meeting House Road is under construction, I think, for 20-some years now. So I know the developer's excited to get this road accepted as a town road. This is the last one. And it has been, in terms of oversight, the DPW department has been overseeing the construction through the process. They've already actually made a recommendation to the planning board that it's ready for acceptance. So there isn't, interesting enough, as some of this comes up, which we'll probably be talking about later, is like streetlights. There aren't streetlights, so there isn't an added streetlight cost. I know that's something that's come up more recently.
And there were no streetlights spec'd in the original?
No. So no, there wasn't.
At corners or anything like that?
This one is really essentially straightaway, so there really wasn't any tip. I think the streetlights were on this abutting streets to intersect, so in this case. But generally speaking, the planning board has kind of moved away from streetlights in the subdivisions, except for intersections, that kind of thing, so not as much for it. But anyway, it is ready for acceptance, and there's not much more to say if you have any questions.
Has the board voted on it, fine, as a,
The board will vote on it on April 11th. So the select board voted last night
okay.
to refer it to the planning board. And then the select board was, well, I'm trying to think, they have a meeting on the 18th, maybe, I think, of April, something like that.
Ask him. Ask Justin.
Yeah, I don't know.
Does it have to go back to them after you guys vote on it?
Yeah, it goes back. Okay, so they refer it out for a recommendation, then the recommendation from the planning board comes back,
Okay,
and they have to hold a
All
public
right.
meeting on it, and then they provide notice to the abutters
okay,
so there's a whole
thank you.
standard process to follow. But there isn't anything that's,
There's no secret problems like.
no,
there's
there's no
been on a
secret
couple other
problems.
ones. Okay,
Straight,
all right,
which is nice.
yes.
It's clean. There's
Okay.
nothing,
And-
isn't always the case. But
Justin, you're comfortable that it's coming back to you guys at some point, or to your board?
Yes, that's what we've typically done,
Yeah,
and
okay. All right.
we'll be prepared for it. Yeah,
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Do you want to talk about the master plan now? Or does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry.
Nope. I don't.
Pretty easy one, so.
sure, so.
Funding for the master plan, year 2.
So year 2 is a request for $50,000, which was the balance of, if you recall last year at the town meeting, we put in, at least in the warrants, it was 100,000 being asked for, but we only requested 50,
Yep.
and, which was actually kind of interesting. Town meeting's always kind of fun. It was actually, some people got up and said, let's put it in now,
Yeah.
which, when we started it last year, it's interesting, right?
Can't do a 2-year authorization, so it didn't make a whole.
No, but what I'm saying is when we formulated to go forward with the master plan after we got the
Right.
$40,000 grant, we're like, well, we want to, finance director doing his job and the town administrator is like, well,
Right.
anyway. Be conservative in your ask. So that's what we did, and it turned out the opposite at town meeting.
So when did they come on board to start the plan?
They start in December,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And so.
Brian asked that, I think it was Brian asked that
He
previously.
did, right.
So what's the expected sort of, when are they going to hand you a plan?
The expectation is next June, so June
Okay.
of '24.
All right.
In terms of where they're at, they've been reviewing so as part of this planning process, will be what you asked about, Brian, is, okay, here's the 2007 master plan of what has been accomplished, what needs to be readdressed or addressed differently. That's certainly going to be a part of it. And this plan will have more of a public input process. So we have the public workshop for the community at the Freeman County on the 25th of April, but then they're going to go out to for example, the farmers market. There's other events that they're going to actually go to in terms of to reach out to get additional input for residents.
Community Day, suggest
Community Day, yep, that was one of the ones so the master plan steering committee met last week, and that was one of the things they mentioned about Community Day, to attend Community Day. And then there'll be a survey that'll occur, that'll be put up on the website as well when we get to that point. And when we did you maybe participated in the one for Southwood. I'm digressing a little bit, but we had the public workshop, which we had people take the survey, but then we put it out on the website. We ended up getting like 400 responses, which is a pretty good response.
That is a very good response.
Yeah, and the good thing about structuring the survey was identifying who, like, obviously on the system, but you could identify what your connection is to the town.
Right.
So it would be a similar. So.
Any questions? Jonathan, do you want to go first, since you might be leaving?
I have no questions.
Anyone else? All right. Kiara, do you have any quick question, Kiara? You'd indicated you might have to leave early. What time would that be if it is happening?
I have to leave by 8:30.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Actually, I do have a question. So what if town meeting decides not to give the next 50? What's the contingency plan for the?
So we've structured the contract with MAPC to, I could say in the contract, to get into specifics, so we have a contingency built in, because when we put it out to bid, we put it in that we only had $90,000, so it won't be a
So they
completed.
give you like a $90,000 statement
Yeah.
of work and a 140 statement of work?
Yeah, so I'll forward you the contract so you can take a look, because
great.
it
Thank you.
spells it out.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, that's great. I thank you, Rich.
Okay.
We got,
So the conservation article?
oh, okay. And I apologize. We don't have any language in front of us yet, so I can't even remember what this.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, because I have, all right. Well,
What is it?
you want us to come, you want them to come back?
No, please do it. Give us the overview at least.
All right, so they're amending the wetland bylaws to allow, so maintenance activities pertain to public and private roadways that meet the definition of minor activities as defined under 310 CMR 10 blah, 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 that section.
Yep.
I printed it out so I can give it to you so you
Okay,
can,
great.
so you can take a look at it.
Yep.
And performance standards outlined thereunder, provided that advance notice, oral or written, has been given to the Conservation Commission prior to commencement of work or within 24 hours after commencement. So essentially what it,
Does this bring it into alignment with the state?
Wetlands Protection Act, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine. That's my main question.
that's what it's intended to do.
Okay. And those activities are defined in that
Yes,
regulation?
exactly, yeah, it defines what those activities are.
Okay.
Because technically we're,
No, I understand the technically part.
well, what we're not doing.
Yeah, right.
We want to make sure,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. So anyway, I have,
Could you pass the language around? That'd be great,
Yeah,
thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.
Yep. that was it.
Does anyone think they have any questions on this one?
Not until I read it.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is, so.
So that's a question.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, you got, so
You're gonna have to do a seminar on the Wetlands Protection Act.
So what are we looking at here?
that is, so you're looking at 310 CMR 10, it's the Wetlands Protection Act regulations.
Okay. And what we're suggesting, and the Warren article says to,
So it's going to provide for maintenance activities as defined for public and private roadways under the act?
The warrant is going to provide for maintenance?
No, excuse me. The wetland bylaw, the general wetland
But
bylaw,
what is the actual warrant article doing? That's what I don't understand.
it's adding a new section, section D.
To adhere to this.
It will put this into our town bylaw.
No, it will reference this.
Reference that.
Okay. So again, my question, I have no idea what.
We're going to need the
real-life
language
example.
for this.
Yeah. So what will happen is when DPW wants to go out and put a guardrail in near a wetland buffer, they can do that without having to do a filing. Put a street sign in, you need to do that. You want to repave within existing pavement, those kind of activities under DPW they would do, it would be allowed. That's a minor activity under the
So we're
wetland
changing the
protection.
town's bylaws to allow minor activities as spelled out in CMR 310 to occur in accordance with the state guidance.
Yeah.
Okay.
For public and private ways.
This is actually the state
Right.
wetlands by regulation, so essentially we're making our bylaws reflect what's in that regulation. Anyone else?
It would be great to be able to see the bylaw.
I have to read it, yeah.
I appreciate
I
what you're saying.
forget,
And
yeah.
we're going to talk about that in a second.
I need to
Okay.
go.
Yes,
I can dial
thank you.
back in. That is
I don't, how long?
legitimate.
Call back in, because I don't think we're going to be that long after this, but please call back in.
Okay.
If you want. If we're not here, we're not here. Thank you.
I'll call back in for my car, so.
Oh, okay, I see what
60
you're saying.
seconds.
Okay.
So once you
Sorry,
get
thank
the warrant, it's the section of the general wetland bylaw for the town, it's in there. And so what I'm saying is if you want to have, Caitlin's on vacation, the conservation agent, otherwise
She would have been here.
she would have been here, would give you a better answer than mine.
Why don't we
Thanks, Jonathan.
keep her on reserve for probably that last meeting, the one that comes after the schools. Although I don't think, maybe next week, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Next week is probably change. We'll talk about that. in a second.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Rich.
All right.
Thanks.
Should I wait for Jonathan to vote on the minutes, or? Oh, we don't have minutes. Okay, all
We
right.
don't.
Okay. So I spoke to Justin earlier today. We're going to get our version, we're going to get our warrant, we're going to get the warrant shortly.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So the select board voted last night to execute the warrant. There was just another adjustment, so we'll send that over to Erica and David tonight, so you'll have all that language and be prepared for next week, I guess.
Okay. We were talking about having the Energy Committee and the building inspector here next week. The stretch code change is not on the warrant, so we don't need them to come. We do now have the conservation agent coming back. The schools are coming in 2 weeks. But Justin and I talked earlier about having next week be going through a lot of the, I don't want to call it boilerplate, but that first clump of articles. Jonathan has rejoined us.
Yes.
Yes.
Say hello, Jonathan. He can't vote anyways. And we could probably start voting on stuff next week.
Okay.
The simple stuff that we don't have questions on.
Yep.
I'm gonna wanna, we're looking for some stuff from the CPC on their stuff, so that'll be helpful there. If we get it, we can maybe talk about some of those or all of them next week. Street acceptance is gone. There's gonna be a discussion about the school design request, I think. There's an article on that. Is that not correct, Justin, or what's the?
So there was an article, the select board last night voted the warrant without including that article. I think we're gonna talk about it a little bit further. There needs to be further discussion there. So if we do include it, we would open and close the warrant, but right now, on the warrant, that article is not on for this town meeting.
And if we have to talk about it, we'll talk about it at the April 5th meeting, which is the meeting
Yeah.
about the school budget. Okay. Yes, Joyce?
I was just going to ask, Justin, are they planning on doing a school design committee report during town meeting? Do you know? Because I thought it was strange last week when we were looking at the preliminary tentative draft warrant that we were potentially going to see that warrant article without having any sort of a committee report about it.
Yeah.
So now that's not there. So are they planning on coming in, do you know?
Joyce, I don't know. I don't
just
know.
wondered.
I know they had a community event last night. We had a select board meeting last night, so they
Right.
did have a community meeting about that project last night. So I couldn't attend that, so I do not know. I think next week, after I speak with Ingrid and her team, I think we'll have a better sense of where we are on that project.
Okay,
So I
I
don't
just
want to
wondered.
say anything without fully understanding it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
Brian.
Thank you.
So last week, Justin, you were talking about potentially getting departments to come in, department heads to come in. If next week's schedule is more open, is that an opportunity?
I guess the
Or are
question
we
is do
punting
we
that?
need, is there anyone we want to talk to? I mean, or is there anyone, Justin, that you think we should talk to?
Right.
Let me give you just a quick update there too. Maybe that will give you some guidance. So yesterday we opened up our budgeting software to departments to go back in and do some adjustments there. We haven't received anything just yet. There's been some ideas floated. So what I could suggest is if we do get some departments in there and if some of the suggestions that we're currently considering we do implement, I can email Erica, Dave, the advisory committee and suggest that maybe we bring these departments in for next week if we can coordinate schedules.
Yep.
That's fine.
So the agenda should read presentation from town administrator and department heads or something like that. And
Give the flexibility at least.
yeah.
I'm hoping, I put on my calendar for next Tuesday to meet with Pod and some departments to go through their submissions, so I hope that they'll be done by that point.
Was there any articles that, I think we talked about this last week though, was there any articles that made you think you needed to talk to the DPW director or police chief or anything?
No.
Okay. So unless there's a major budget adjustment or that there's something, yeah, we'll leave it to you to figure out who needs to be here, and we'll talk earlier next week.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
great. I think with that, we're done. Can you bop him off so I can see Kiara? How does he get off the screen?
I'll turn it off. Have a good
okay.
evening, everyone.
Nothing personal, Justin.
Yeah, I would have to come on.
Night.
Okay, you're there. All right. I think we're. Do you have any questions from your end at this point?
No, it all seemed straightforward to me for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Well, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Night.